followed by Senator Stone and Fuller. Senator
Great.
Gaines.
Yeah, thank you, Madam President and members. I rise in opposition to SCA 14. And I know I've got to go beyond the fact that the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association is opposed to it. And so I'm going to go through some reasons here that I hope would help my colleagues across the aisle in why this is a bad step to take and why we ought to let the process occur with the California Legislative Transparency Act. Let that appear on the ballot and let's vote it up or down. The first reason being that the 72 hours before a final vote can be taken upon a piece of legislation in each house is a critical aspect. What you'd be voting on the floor here would be a 72-hour period in only the second house. So this would give more deliberative time on both sides, both the Assembly and the Senate, on key legislation that we ought to have all the facts on. Secondly, SCA 14 does not require the recording and posting of off-site hearings. So there could be hearings that are held throughout the state of California. Those hearings that are not within the body here would not be recorded, and I think the public deserves to know what's happening at those hearings also. Thirdly, SCA 14 only requires the posting of AV recordings on the next business day. So if you had a situation where we had a hearing on a Friday, that would not occur until the following Monday. Under the California Legislative Transparency Act, the AV recordings must be posted within 24 hours. Fourthly, the California Legislative Transparency Act creates a constitutional right for individuals to record and transmit legislative proceedings. SCA 14 does not. Fifth, the language of SCA 14 related to the posting and archiving of AV recordings is more limited and vague than the California Legislative Transparency Act. And specifically, with the California Legislative Transparency Act, it requires the recordings to be posted and available on the internet, which makes it very accessible to a common Californian within 24 hours without a restriction on the duration. So 5 reasons in my mind that we ought to let the initiative process move forward on what I think is a very good initiative for the California Legislative Transparency Act, and will give the people an opportunity to make that vote on something that's going to provide clarity that I think has been very difficult to provide, and I do appreciate Senator Wilk's efforts, or I should say the good senator from Davis, on her efforts to provide transparency within the legislature here. But it's just has not happened historically. I think we've gotten to the point where it has to be the initiative that will be coming forward on the November ballot. So I am in support of the California Legislative Transparency Act in opposition of SCA 14. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Gaines. Senator Stone.
Thank you, Madam President and colleagues. This is a very tough issue that we're being asked to weigh in on today. I get concerned when I hear comments from my colleague from Orange County that says that money will dictate the success of an initiative and not the policy. I will always fight for the policy and to what's right on behalf of my constituents, irrespective of how much money is thrown against that which I believe in. When I was on the Temecula City Council in 1992 for 12 years and on the Riverside County Board of Supervisors for 10 years, we all had to abide by the Brown Act. We had to meet in public, we had to post our agendas, we had to put the explicit detail of what we were going to be voting on or voting against. It let people know what was going to be discussed by their elected officials, and it forced decision makers to inform the public of the actual language of their proposed rules and ordinances. That process has worked across California since the Brown Act was enacted in 1953, 3 years before I was even born. When I arrived in the state Senate, I was frankly surprised about the lack of transparency that existed. We too often gut and amend bills with little or virtually no public notice, not to the benefit of the constituents that entrust us to come up here and do the citizens' work. If we don't want the public to know what we're doing, we'll hold last-minute committee meetings on the floor in the dead of night and then jam through bills in the early morning hours, just minutes after the committee held a so-called public meeting, which we all know is a sham. A lot of debate today is focused on how the proposed initiative known as the California Legislative Transparency Act is a superior vehicle to SCA 14. I'm not convinced of that. And as the CLTA initiative has issues of its own, and my belief that SCA 14 is a proposal worthy of us today to put on the ballot so voters can decide if they want more open legislative processes here in the state capitol. Of course, it would be my desire that the proponents of the initiative and the great senator from Davis will continue to work together to come up with one initiative, because I think both sides want the same thing. The CLTA initiative is certain to be on the ballot because hundreds of thousands of concerned citizens have rallied to demand transparency and accountability by signing petitions to put it on the ballot. My friends, that is a good thing. But just because we have a measure likely to be on the ballot shouldn't stop us from taking action to pass SCA 14 that will give voters another opportunity on the upcoming ballot to demand more transparency from their government. Further, members, this measure is the only opportunity this body has before it to send a message to those of us fortunate enough to serve in the legislature that we are serious about creating a more open and transparent government. After reading the text of the initiative and the text of SCA 14, my friends, and I have spent hours analyzing every word, every paragraph, comparing and contrasting them, I've come to the conclusion that SCA 14 fixes many of the numerous flaws that are in the initiative. First, the initiative requires a 72-hour notice for bills to be voted on their so-called final form. Final form. What does that mean? Is the final form the bill that ultimately goes to the governor's desk? Does it mean a bill that's up for concurrence? Does it apply to bills in their first policy committee, their first house, the second house, or what? We don't know. SCA 14 is much more clear. It simply requires that a bill must be in print for at least 72 hours before it can be voted on. Now, there is a glitch in SCA 14, which I brought to the attention of the author. As the bill passes its first house, there is not a requirement that there's a 72-hour posting. It goes to the second house, where there must be a 72-hour posting. If they pass it, when it comes back to the House of Origin, then it has to have a 72-hour notice before we can vote on it. That's a problem for me. I've addressed it with the author, and she's assured me that she's going to take some amendments that will ensure the integrity of what we're trying to accomplish, will prove that no matter what house we're voting on a bill, there will be 72 hours notice in print, online, before legislators voting for it. The meaning is clear. SCA 14 guarantees it will have seeing the actual language of any measure we vote on full 72 hours before we cast our votes. That gives us and our staff a chance to fully review and contemplate the measures we're considering, but more importantly, it gives our constituents the opportunity to have time to respond to us and let us know how they feel about particular issues. I think this is a good thing and is one of the main reasons why I'm arguing for the passage of SCA 14. Another potential issue with the initiative involves how audio and TV recordings of the legislature can be used. The initiative says that video, audio, and photographs taken by the Senate can be used for any legitimate purpose. Who decides what that legitimate purpose is? SCA 14 strengthens this language by simply removing all restrictions on reproducing or rebroadcasting images taken in the legislative meetings. No any legitimate purpose, any purpose. The language is clear. Also, SCA 14 requires the live streaming of legislative meetings. The initiative doesn't do that. Live streaming, real-time citizens engaged in government utilizing modern-day technology on the internet, and requires the recording of public meetings held outside the Capitol, which I believe the initiative is silent on. This actually goes beyond the initiative. The initiative, again, doesn't require this, and I believe having recorded meetings outside the Capitol available to the public is a very important component of SCA 14. Some of my friends that I've spoken to that I respectfully understand their opposition to this measure before us point out that the initiative locks everything into the Constitution, and the SCA 14 allows for some modifications by the legislature on a simple majority vote. That's true. But is that necessarily bad? How many times are problems found by initiatives, Prop 47, after, as an example, after they've been passed by the voters, and we've all heard about the complaints and flaws in many other ballot measures that are passed by the voters. Wouldn't it be nice that the legislature could allow for minor technical fixes without being obligated, per the language of the initiative, to go back before a vote of the people to make those corrections? It's very onerous, it's very expensive, and frankly, it's not done. The legislature is basically powerless to change the law when an initiative gets on that ballot. SCA 14 allows for some amendments if there is a problem that arises. For instance, the initiative being circulated for passage requires electronic recordings to be downloadable. That's great. But what happens when technology moves ahead and video footage no longer needs to be downloadable to view? SCA 14 uses technology-neutral terms that won't require an amendment if technology advances to a point where it won't take a download to view a video clip or an audio clip. Further, are any of us here today to believe that future senators will ever cast a public vote to strip away the public's right to a transparent government? If we tell voters they can't watch what we're doing, how long will it take for them to vote us out of office? I want to be clear that I believe the initiative language that may end up on the ballot is a great start. If it weren't for the proponents spending considerable time and energy to secure signatures, I'm fairly certain we wouldn't be here on the floor debating a transparency issue here in the state Senate. But I also think that there's ample room for improvement of the initiative in circulation. SCA 14 is this body's attempt to improve the initiative, and I frankly believe we shouldn't limit our options on the upcoming ballot. The author of this measure has been an advocate of transparency for years, has worked with my colleague from Los Angeles, and unfortunately they couldn't get it out of committee because there was not a competing issue instigating and expediting that to come out of committee, and that's why she's authored SCA 10 in 2013. I share the author's belief that we need more of a transparent way of doing business in the state capitol, and I further believe we all want more open government. Having 2 transparency measures on the ballot may actually help our goal of creating more open and accessible government. SCA 14 is our opportunity today to send a message to the people of the state of California that we really believe in open government. Members, as I conclude, it is my hope that the proponents of the initiative will continue to work with the great senator from Davis. It would be my preference to have one comprehensive transparency initiative that accomplishes the goals that we all strive here today. So please join me today in voting for transparency. The only time since I've been here that we have this opportunity to do it. And I can tell you that when I go before my constituents, the million people that I represent, I can honestly tell them I supported SCA 14 because it will create more open government. And for these reasons, I respectfully ask for you to vote yes on SCA 14.
Senator Fuller.
Madam President and fellow members, I rise today to commend the author for her efforts to bring greater transparency to our legislative process. The author has been working very hard, and she is known for listening, to bring a bill forth that would mandate the legislature to give the public an opportunity to have a say on bills that go through their government. But I today, as a former superintendent for 17 years and an educator for 32 years, have abided by the Brown Act, a much stronger criteria, and have already done most of the things in this bill. And I was always, as a school superintendent, perplexed why my legislature didn't voluntarily impose those standards on themselves, because we could today. And yet I would see that bills day after day, year after year, would come forward and die in committee. And since I've been up here for 9 years, I've never seen a bill come forward from our body that actually got out, that we actually imposed that standard on ourselves. I don't know, yes, we're busy, and yes, there are other things going on, but we know the standard. Most of us served in local government, and we know that that standard was not applied to us. So I'm not afraid today to stand in front of you and say that I'm ashamed of myself and all of us, because while this is a good bill and it's trying to get better, it is not today in its state that imposes the standards of the Brown Act, nor of the Citizens Legislative Act. It is not of that standard today. It is still hopeful, but not real, not done, not to the standard of the People's Legislative Act that is actually called the California Legislative Transparency Initiative. And so today, I am conflicted. I think we should have long ago made this statement and done it ourselves, and we could have. But since we haven't, I have to say that there is a better bill that's not too little and too late, and not just promises. It's already qualified by 1 million voices. Well, not qualified. I'm not going to say that. It's been submitted and about to qualify. And it is a much stronger bill that will ensure our bosses, the citizens of California, will have a constitutional guarantee that backroom deals are over. That's what's been going on for years. A guarantee that all Californians will have at least 3 days to review the bills before they go up for a vote. A guarantee that our legislative hearings will be filmed and available for all constituents to see and to react to. Yes, this bill has improved, and I credit the author. But this bill today is not as good as the People's Choice, and it is not strong enough for me to vote for. It is not improved enough to make a statement that I'm proud of, that this is what we want to be known for providing ourselves for a high standard for our citizens. And I'm going to make you laugh just for a minute. because I really, of all people, hate to have my picture taken. I hate to have a bad picture. I am always very angry. I don't care if they print what I said wrong, but I surely get mad at when my hair is having a bad day. And those darn photographers took a picture anyway. So I should be the last to say that I urge you to consider a high standard. I urge you to give the people their voice. I urge you to restore the trust of all Californians with their government. Today, I stand with over 1 million voters and ask you to vote no on SCA 14. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Bates.
Thank you, Madam President, members. What strikes me today, and let me pile on with the accolades for the good senator from Davis, got that right? Struggling all these years to get something before us so we have transparency that I know she served, as I did and many of us have, at local government where there is no question about total transparency. And if you don't provide it, there are a number of people, organizations, and certainly reporters that do a Public Records Act request and everything is provided them. What troubles me is that today we seem to be debating what access we will provide and how that will be provided. And that shows that there's some conscience here about the manipulation that we have over the proceedings and the publications that we receive as we take votes and debate and deliberate on a variety of resolutions and measures. But that is very troubling. We all know in our business, perception is reality. When you have an initiative that is going to be on the ballot that is supported by 1 million signatures, and I believe one of those was mine, and we are putting forth something that's going to have perhaps 27 votes of legislators who are affected and have been trying to, what I consider, change, manipulate, suppress access. There's a real problem when putting 2 on and 1 is supported by this body that doesn't have a lot of confidence generally out there. This is the only government in our state that has some sort of problems with access, complete access and transparency to the deliberations proceedings in this House. So consider that. I just believe we need more time with a compromise discussion on the 2 proposals before it goes to the other house. If there are changes in the other house, we're still living with what we have. It will come back here for concurrence without complete understanding of what was changed. And I'm still a little confused hearing the variety of comments here about what's in it, what's not in it, why one's better, why one isn't. We need more time, folks, and I think that that is a very, very strong statement to the 1 million people who signed this and the millions that will be asked to vote on 2 competing measures if it goes on the ballot as 2. And believe me, I want to again remind you, perception is reality, and the perception will be that this legislature is still afraid to have one measure out there that addresses something that has been demanded for how many years has the good senator from Davis been working on this? So please consider that. It's better to lay off on the vote today, ask for more time, we have more time, so we can get perfection. And then reality, it will be perfection. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further debate or discussion? Seeing and hearing none, Senator De Leon will do the close. Senator De Leon.
Thank you much, Madam President. And I will close out this debate today. One, I want to thank very much Senator Lois Wolk from Yolo County, from Davis, because you have been steadfast committed to this issue on 72 hours and transparency for a very, very long time. And I want to thank you for what you do every single day, not just for your constituents in Yolo County and elsewhere in Napa, but for the state of California when it comes to the issue of transparency. You know, believe it or not, I also want to recognize Mr. Munger for his tireless efforts and his expense for bringing this issue to the forefront. The reality is, I think there were certain references that were made by several of our colleagues that acknowledged his heartfelt commitment to the issue of transparency for the state of California. And the reality is this: we live in the most innovative state in the nation, in the entire world. And we should harness the power of technology to bring policymaking, politics to the people of California. I know that when I became leader of this chamber, one of the first things that I did back in 2014 was make sure, for the first time ever in the history of this institution since the founding of the state of California, was to bring live streaming of all policy and fiscal committee hearings and off-site hearings too in the field, whether it was in the Central Valley, whether it was in the Bay Area or Southern California or elsewhere. For the first time in history, every single policy and fiscal committee were live streamed to the people. Why? Because not everyone in Southern California or elsewhere has the financial wherewithal to purchase and buy lobbyists and other high-priced consultants to advocate for them in the state capitol. Why? Because we have so many working Californians who don't have the financial wherewithal, the wealth, to come to the state capitol and forcefully advocate for the issues that they care deeply about. So what are we going to do, and what did we do? We brought government to the people. First time ever, live streaming in the state of California. In fact, we're ahead of the United States Congress and the U.S. Senate, those venerable institutions. They don't do that in Washington, D.C., nor do they do this in any other state in the Union. And this is our commitment to the people of California, to bring democracy and policymaking to every individual, irrespective of who you are, not just venture capitalists in Silicon Valley or billionaires in Los Angeles or Malibu, but hardworking people of every hue in the state of California. That's what we do, and that's what we've been doing here in the great U.S. of the great Senate. Now, that being said, this measure is not in its final form. It is not. But because of the process and the way it works, we need to move this measure to our colleagues on the Assembly side, because the negotiations continue on this very important issue. Now, I want to give a special recognition to Senator Hertzberg as well, too, because when he was not a senator a few years ago, my predecessor, our former pro tem, Darrell Steinberg, moved a measure that dealt with ballot initiatives. Before we spend tens of millions of dollars from either individuals or special interests, before we do that, let's have an opportunity, all of us, Democrats and Republicans, openly, in a transparent fashion, dive into the arcane complexities of the issue. We did that successfully with minimum wage. Now, what's amazing about this institution is I have a tremendous amount of respect for my counterpart, the Republican leader, Ms. Fuller from Kern County. We may be diametrically opposed in a whole variety of perspectives and views on policy, but the respect we have with each other, the respect that every Democrat and Republican has afforded each other here is quite amazing, and in fact, is an example for the rest of the nation, especially the juvenile institutions that are the U.S. Congress and Senate, in comparison to how we comport ourselves and how we move body of products to help improve the human condition for all individuals. For the past 5 to 6 months, we have been engaged in the MCO tax reform, where we saved $1 billion from the general fund. We have done minimum wage, whether people concur or not concur with minimum wage. We have made historic investments, $330 million investments in the developmentally disabled community, where Republicans and Democrats came together alike. We just passed a $172 billion budget yesterday. So we have been focused. We have rolled up our sleeves. We have been doing the people's work every day. We just passed, whether people concur or not, vaccinations. We just passed, whether people concur or not, life, death with dignity. Whether people concur or not, we just passed yesterday 9,000 pre-K slots to those families who have no money. Whether people concur or not, we just passed 7,500 enrollment slots. Guess what? Not everyone can go to Stanford or MIT or Columbia, Harvard, Yale, Oxford, or Cambridge. But we're giving every kid at every low economic strata a real opportunity to go on to the University of California and the CSU. That's what we have been doing collectively as a legislative body, Democrats and Republicans. We have come up with the most progressive, far-reaching policies in the United States of America. And we've done this in 2016. 6 months, we're at the halfway point of this year. That's an incredible body of work. Now, we're with SCA 14. And again, I want to thank you. And again, I want to emphasize a very special thank you, and I'm doing it publicly and openly on this red carpet in the Senate chamber. Thank you to Mr. Munger for being a fine citizen of California and for believing in California and caring about California. No doubt about it. Now, we have different views on a whole variety of issues, but one thing that we do agree about is bringing democracy to the people of California. And I think this is a good compromise for the people of California, not a final product. We have to continue to work, but that is the legislative process. This is the process. So we vote this measure, move it on, we continue our dialogue and discussions, and it is my hope that we can find common ground. If we can find common ground, it's good for the people of California. With that, Madam President, I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
All debate having ceased, Mr. Secretary, please call the roll.
Allen. Aye. Anderson. No. Bates. No. Bell. Aye. Berryhill. Block. Aye. Cannella. De Leon. Aye. Fuller. No. Gaines. No. Galgiani. Glazer. Aye. Hall. Aye. Hancock. Aye. Hernandez. Aye. Hertzberg. Aye. Hill. Aye. Wesso. Aye. Huff. Jackson.
Aye.
Aye. Lada. Aye. Leno. Aye. Leva. Aye. Liu. Aye. McGuire. Aye. Mendoza. Aye. Mitchell. Aye. Monning. Aye. Morlock. No. Morrell. Wynn. Nilsson. No. Pan. Aye. Pavley. Aye. Roth. Aye. Runner. Stone. Aye. Vidak. No. Wykowski. Aye. Wolk. Wolk, aye.
Please call the absent members.
Berryhill. No. Cannella. Galgiani. Aye. Huff. Morrell. Wynn. Runner.
Ayes 27, noes 8. The resolution is adopted, and without objection, there will be immediate transmittal to the Assembly. There are messages from the Assembly. Mr. Secretary, please read.
Madam President, I am directed to inform your honorable body that the Assembly amended and on this day passed as amended Senate Bill 836, 837, 838, 843, 839, and Senate Bill 840, and respectfully request your honorable body to concur in said amendments. E. Dotson Wilson, Chief Clerk of the Assembly. Above bills ordered to unfinished business.
Thank you. Colleagues, we are going to go now to the first supplemental file, file item 136, SB 836.